Welcome to Movie Bounce with Mike and Harry, where we'll bounce from movie to movie.
From actor, writer, director, any which way.
Who knows where we'll bounce to next? Hi, everybody, it's Mike here.
Harry's here again.
And it's another bonus episode of Star Wars. We got 3 more days left till Christmas, and we're kicking things off with A Force Awakens.
Here's the thing. So we went through the original trilogy, we went through the prequels, and now I think what's very interesting to me is we talked about the prequels, we talked about our expectations for that, but it was the first time, right? It was the first time to be exposed to new Star Wars. And this is almost like Star Wars' second try. It's their mea culpa to kind of bring us back in after we were disappointed by the prequels.
Were people still disappointed at that time? I mean, I know we do know that people have come around, and as we mentioned this before, but was like when Disney purchased, when the whole sale of Lucas film and like that occurred, was that Disney's kind of approach? I'm not even sure. Were they like, we gotta unmess this up? Because we did hear that Lucas he had a story or something like that, an outline in terms of where they wanted to go, and they chose not to do that. I did hear that.
They put it in the drawer or whatever.
So there was this kind of, they looked down upon those movies.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So again, for folks who have kind of listened in and out to our episodes, it comes up from time to time. I used to be a huge Star Wars fan. I kind of put it aside for a long time. The prequels didn't help. When I heard that Disney was buying the franchise, I was very cautiously optimistic. I said, look, they bought Marvel, and they really knew what they were doing there. Disney is not going to squander their incredibly insane, acquisition price for this franchise. I felt very confident that they were not going to screw it up, and I was cautiously optimistic for The Force Awakens.
I was as well. I wasn't as optimistic as you because I thought, I did love hearing that they were going to bring back the original cast. Like, that's great, but how far are we going to go down this path? Because I think, in my mind, as we mentioned in the previous episode, I thought, I wanted to see an episode 7, but just with the main cast being the focal point. I wanted to see how they would deal with the upcoming challenge. And then when you hear that they're going to cast new leads, I'm not even sure if that was it. I can't even remember that, if we were aware that they were the new leads. That's when I got a little bit kind of hesitant. Wait a minute, are they pushing aside the original cast for this new story to occur? If that's the case, I wouldn't be that interested in it because I was so kind of beholden to that original cast. That's what I wanted to see. What are they going to be faced with now? I wanted to see them confront that threat, whatever it would be. But
and I love how you love the original cast. Because for me, it's less about them and it's more about the actual Star Wars galaxy and what they're going to do in the galaxy and with all of those elements that we've seen before. So that's really interesting to me because I think we're approaching this from separate angles.
It's almost the complete opposite.
And we're going to end up converging, I think, in our opinions, but for sure.
But that's the thing. It's what you were looking forward to is what I wasn't looking forward to. So I wanted to see that dynamic that I've had that first got my attention when I was a kid, right before that trash compactor scene, that energy that those three had. I would love to see that, brought back again, and as they're confronting a new threat. And I was just very much just from the news that I heard, we'll wait and see. And I remember the first day when the trailer was released. It was just a teaser trailer, and then you can see they introduced the new characters. I'm like, okay, this is fine. Okay, absolutely, bring the new characters in, but how much screen time is going to be devoted to Luke, Han, and Leia? So that's where I was really kind of cautious and really didn't have much excitement for. And I was not a huge fan of J.J. Abrams. I think that I wanted to his first film was Mission Impossible 3. And I know I did like Mission Impossible. I thought it was a fine movie when it came out. The second one I thought was cool because the motorcycles through fire. But I did have hope that the third one would be very good. And it was actually my least favorite of the three, somehow.
Well, it wasn't terrible. I mean,
I
didn't think it was a bad movie. I mean, yeah.
As much as I like J.J. Abrams, like his commitment to make a film good, I think it just reached good. I think it reached to, like, I feel like, I felt like at the time, and I didn't want to feel this way, but it's just something that just came off the screen. Like, I think around the hour, 45-minute mark in Mission Impossible 3, I got this feeling. It was a scene where Tom Cruise was just like running nonstop. I believe it's through Shanghai. And I just go, this movie, it set up at the beginning that there were really heavy stakes, and I really love that, with a heavy villain. But then it just seems like you're just kind of spinning your wheels and you just want to entertain, and that's kind of like what you're going for, and it's not really. It's like a fan making a film for the fans, and that's what was just came off the screen within 3, and it didn't make that much of an impact for me after the film was over. And I thought it had a very strong first half, the beginning of the film, and it just let me down toward the end. And many people love Mission Impossible 3. I wish I could be one of them, but that happened there. And then of course he went on to do Star Trek, the film there, and I wasn't a huge Star Trek fan, but I did like what he did within the first half of Star Trek.
I like that movie, and I went in with zero exposure to Star Trek, so I'm familiar with as much Star Trek as any other person is, and I rather enjoyed that movie actually, and I thought like, oh okay, like I could get into this. But
yeah, I enjoyed it actually. I thought it was a fine movie, but again, it's like okay, and I think that what he did in just really, well, Star Trek initially, I think in Mission Impossible 3 he did have a strong beginning. Like he knew how to get your attention within the first 2 minutes of the film to hook you. And but I think what he did in Star Trek is that he really spent the time to really commit to the character development, and I really like that. That's the best aspect. He did all the heavy lifting within Star Trek, and he did that so well. So that was the good thing I knew that he would bring to the table within A Force Awakens. So that was great, and I'm like, okay, and then you line it with the trio, with Han, Luke, and Leia. But the thing is, even after Star Trek was over with, I'm like, okay, that was fine. It was a nice ride. I didn't think it was great. I really like the characters. I'm committed to them. But in terms of the second half of the movie, it kind of lost me a bit there. So I noticed there's this trend with J.J. Abrams movies where it has a very strong first half,
a second half.
Yeah, and then I go, all right, I'm just kidding. I'm ready for disappointment here to some degree within A Force Awakens. So I just saw that initial teaser, and I'm like, all right, we'll just see when that day comes out. It just seems so far away. And then the day came where the film was finally released.
Can I cut you off there for a second? Because I want to talk a little bit about my experience with the trailer.
Especially the build-up, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of shut myself down for this stuff. I was like, I'll see it when I see it. I've been through the ringer before. I've been fooled already. Like I will reserve judgment for, the actual day when I'm sitting in that theater seat. And then I remember, my brother and I were at my mother's house and we were putting up a Christmas tree. And my father, my brother takes out his phone and he shows me the trailer for...
You saw it on a phone.
I saw it on the phone. David Lynch would be very upset with me. I saw it on a fucking phone. And he shows it to me and I liked it because... And I believe I mentioned this when we did A New Hope. But that teaser trailer was very reminiscent of one of the very early trailers of A New Hope in that it was very stark. It was almost creepy. Like, they showed you some stuff to get you going, but it was a very empty trailer. It definitely...
Well, it was a teaser. I think most teasers are, you give it that, they're allowed to be empty because it's just, you're not even getting much dialogue. Because the film's not finished nearly at that point either.
Oh, sure. But when I say empty, I mean, it's not even that it was bereft of content. It was, they chose these scenes that were very isolated. So I recall like it was like Rey on like Jakku just kind of being there, like solitary. And there were a couple of scenes that were a little bit more like energetic. Like I remember seeing BB-8 and seeing the X-Wings and stuff like that. But the overall atmosphere of the trailer seemed very desolate. And I'm like, that's interesting. And that's kind of where I left off. And then, you and we saw the movie together on opening night. And then I think that's where our conversation now really kicks off.
Yeah, it's funny. I haven't watched that teaser trailer, I guess, since it was released. And the only two things I remember from the film is John Boyega taking off the stormtrooper helmet because it was such an image of like you've never seen a stormtrooper other than Han Solo and like Luke when they were impersonating stormtroopers, but you've never seen one actually take off their helmet. And you go, "Ooh, wow, where are we going with this? Like, this is interesting." Like why, what was the reason for, are we going to be, is this the, I didn't have any context at the time. So you think, okay, is this the villain? Is it the hero? What's the deal. So, and then you had the scene of the Millennium Falcon flying up in the air. It was almost like that image you had of like in that initial Man of Steel teaser where you just saw Superman flying straight up into the sky. You just got the focus on the Millennium Falcon. So those are the two things that really resonated for me from the teaser. But yeah, then it led to that opening day, which I still think it was something like, man, I still couldn't believe that happened. Even after we watched the movie, I was like, did we watch that movie? It's been such a long time coming. It just seemed so far out of reach that it was hard to process that we actually bought the ticket to that movie and saw what we saw.
One of my favorite memories, and this ties into the whole holiday spirit of things, is that for each and every Star Wars movie of the last trilogy, I could not go to my company holiday party because we had tickets to Star Wars.
Right, always on a Thursday evening.
Right.
It was always on a Thursday evening because we couldn't wait till the next day and everyone else has seen it. We have to go in there with our eyes, completely knowing nothing and having the surprises waiting for us. What a great way to watch these films. Man, I can't believe we're missing that this year. We need another one. Listen, their plan, Kathleen Kennedy's plan, before Solo tanked, was to have one of these babies coming out every year. Man, that would have been great if we did have. I mean, a tough year this year, but it would have been on streaming or something like that. It would have been on Disney Plus. But damn, I wish Solo had succeeded. Now that I think about it, but we would have gotten, what is it, a Boba Fett movie or whatever they were going to do.
Right. Well,
but we have Mandalorian.
Series and yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the works. Actually, my brother texted me this morning and he said there's a rumor, and whenever you combine rumor with Star Wars, it's probably not true.
No.
But he did say that there's some kind of inkling or some chatter that they may actually strike this last trilogy from the actual Star Wars canon. And it'll be kind of like a legend story where it didn't really happen, but here's one particular...
How you can do, isn't that incredibly disrespectful to the fans?
Well, they completely wiped away all of the non-movie canon when Disney took over the franchise. So if you were a huge fan and you were reading the books and the comics and playing the video games, that's not true anymore. So they've done it before. They've just never done it with a movie.
So what you're telling me, if this rumor is true, Han Solo is still alive.
It's a possibility.
Then I'm all about it. But Han Solo,
Harrison
Ford said, I gave it one more round. And then you asked me back again. And now you're going to ask me back yet again? Like, no, he's not going to do that. So we're never going to get that anyway. And it's never going to be what I was looking for. On that front, in terms of that trio being, obviously, because Carrie Fisher passed away, that's never going to be there. I think that rumor is just kind of hogwash. But that's just my take.
I'm sure you're
you might
right,
as well go in a completely different direction.
May I drive a wedge further and expand the divide between what you want, what I want?
All right.
I really was disappointed to hear that this new trilogy was to take place in a time and space that allowed for the old characters to still be alive. Because I felt like you're just bringing on more baggage. Like, when you have a fairy tale and they lived happily ever after, if you hold the camera on them for too long, it's not going to be happy anymore. So like I don't need to see all of the stuff that happens to Han Solo, and I don't want to see him when he's old. Like, it's depressing.
Harry, this is a through line through what you expect in movies in general. Correct me if I'm wrong. Characters don't mean as much to you.
No, they do.
But they don't. They clearly, you wouldn't want to. The reason why I say that is because you bring up, you don't want to know more about these characters' journey later on down in decades later after their last
because
chapter.
Their arc was already completed, and I already got that. Anything else you give me is just you're adding on top of it, and you're piling on to something that was already pretty much done and crafted, and they kind of put a bow on it. So now you're coming in and you're backfilling, and I'm like, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Okay.
And I feel it. Yeah.
Go on.
I just don't feel like it's necessary, especially when you have these characters that, they've basically fulfilled their purpose in the original trilogy.
Well, here's the thing. So let me talk about what I disagree with you on. I am all about, if I love the characters, yes, I'd love to see more about them. I'd love to see where they are 20, 30 years.
Yeah,
Hold on. But the catch is, well, if the materials, like you just said, their arc was completed. Well, if they have a new arc, then I want to see that. If they don't, and they're just bringing them out, like, hey, they're on stage for 5 minutes and saying goodbye to them, well, then I don't, because then I agree. You are bringing that baggage, and there's not enough reason to justify them being brought back to the screen to the screen for us to watch again. So yeah,
may I ask you a follow-up question to
Yeah.
that? Did you really think that Disney and J.J. Abrams were going to bring back Han Solo and give him an interesting and depthful arc? Or did you think they were just going to trot him on and have him wave and give thumbs up and maybe say one of his catchphrases and then take him out?
You know what? Then we bring up the third thing I remember from the teaser trailer. I can't believe I forgot it. Is that trailer ended with Han Solo arriving on the Millennium Falcon, and you just heard his voice saying, "Chewie, we're home."
Right.
So actually, towards the end of that trailer, I remember thinking, yeah, this could be. I mean, you're front and center. There he is, and he's saying, "We're home." It gives you this, it insinuates that, ooh, this could be. He's back in the saddle again. So that kind of did, but I wasn't, that's marketing. So I just go, they give me a little bit of hope, but I'm like, yeah, most likely I'm going to be disappointed. So yeah, maybe there was a small little bit of hope, not a great amount of hope, but yeah, potentially I was kind of hoping he would to have a good 45 minutes of the movie, he'd be leading.
Right. So I agree with you. I think if there is a story to tell that goes beyond the original one, by all means go for it. I feel like I've been burned enough where there aren't any more stories to tell, and when you take these old characters out of the mothballs, you never do them justice. At best, you kind of just they're on screen to kind of give you that feeling of nostalgia, and at worst, they actually have a negative effect on their previous legacy. So I guess I just kind of was a little bit more suspicious of their intentions of bringing out Han Solo and Chewbacca, but I'm maybe perhaps a little more cynical with how franchises are handled.
Well, it's also just one little callback to the prequels. I mean, when I've rewatched Revenge of the Sith, there's that scene where everyone, Yoda and Chewbacca are hanging out together. You're getting the core characters all confronting each other.
By
right.
the way.
It's all convenient. It's just everyone's and Yoda's "Thank you, Chewbacca." It's just he couldn't be do we all? Is it that close of a circle, social circle that they're all
right? It's a gigantic galaxy, but yet everybody knows each other.
Right. I would be assuming that when. Well, Chewbacca and Yoda never really met in the original trilogy, but it's just it's talked about. Chewbacca, oh yeah, I remember Yoda. If he, in his own, he doesn't talk but
he knows for $20.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, they've kind of done that, but I agree. It's okay. So here's the thing: for me, when I watch any film, characters mean a lot to me, and especially when it was lightning in a bottle energy that original trio had. I'm all right, fine. If you told that story and that's it, and you didn't bring them out, I'm fine with watching this new trilogy. But you've got to make this dynamic with these new characters. There could be 3 characters, there could be 8. But it's got to be solid for me to be really compelled to go through this world, because I don't love the world as much as you do, Harry. Because again, we've established, we're the inverse here. So I need something that's going to compel me to get through this new trilogy. So that's kind of what I'm going in. That's subconscious. That's what I'm going in kind of expecting, if anything. But again, I'm still holding out hope that the original trio there's going to be a reason to bring them back, and they're going to have those arcs, new arcs, whatever it is. That's the challenge of J.J. Abrams, and let's see what he's going to bring us. So, Harry, what was your initial reaction once the movie was over with? What was your take on A Force Awakens?
Well, thank you for the platform, because this might be lengthy, and I'll definitely try to be mindful of the time, and if I'm rambling, cut me off.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first saw it, I enjoyed it. I thought, coming in, I think my main goal or my main expectation for the movie was, can you wash the bad taste of the prequels out of my mouth? And they did, because they mapped it way more closely to the original trilogy in style and in substance, in characters, etc. I really liked all of the new characters. I liked Rey, I liked Poe, I liked Finn. I really enjoyed their dynamic. I was feeling a little uneasy with how closely it mirrored A New Hope, but at the same time, I just thought, okay, well, they're trying to set the stage, and they have to do it. They have to really win everyone over, and maybe the way they do that is by being slightly similar to what you've seen before. I then watched the movie again, so I've only seen the movie twice. I watched it again on a plane once, and that was when I was like, so I think organically, while we've been doing the prequels, we kind of started to look at movies in terms of, what's the hype? How do you like the movie as a movie, period? How do you like the movie as a Star Wars movie? And then looking at it as a Star Wars movie, I was like, oh, wow, really? Like, this is just, there's hardly an original idea in this movie to be found. And I started to doubt the movie. I still rather enjoy it. I think, if I flip to the opinion of, is it a good movie? It's certainly a fine movie. It's a great sci-fi adventure movie. It has the Star Wars flavor. It has really cool visuals and all of that stuff. So I will, I'll stop short at saying like it is a pretty good movie, period. As a Star Wars movie, I kind of feel now today that it lacks.
That hit me on my first viewing. I think that there was, from my perspective, when I watched, when the films, here's the thing, the most, as we always talk about, we'll always bring up the word, I overuse it, engaging. I think that and like what I mentioned with J.J. Abrams, what he's so skilled at doing, and I feel like he's gotten this from Spielberg, because he did Super 8. Super 8 was another film of his, and I think this was kind of there as well, is that he's so committed. As much I love characters, I love when you bring new characters on board, and they really strike a chord with you, as I mentioned with the original trilogy. But I think that he tries very hard to do what Spielberg was able to do with Jaws, with those three characters, with George Lucas's character, and a lot of other films. I think he works hard to make sure that these characters are going to make an impact on the viewer. But he does it with such careful gloves, and I feel it. Now that
Right.
I do think that he was successful in Force Awakens, obviously. I mean, he spends that time. He makes sure at the beginning of the movie that you're going to be, these characters are going to make quite an impression on the audience. He does that with John Boyega's character, and then you've gotten that with Daisy Ridley's character, and obviously with Oscar Isaac's character. And then he does establish a heavy villain with Adam Driver. You've
Right.
got all those elements in place. However, that lightning in the bottle energy that I initially got with the original cast of the trilogy didn't get that. I think I was more on board John Boyega's character of the three initially. Because we easily can be put in his shoes to some, and there was a mystery there too, because you're like, well, where did he come from? But just, he's like that audience surrogate, like where his motion. He's such a great actor. Where like really taking you through this journey, you're rooting for him once you get more information about him. But I love that it opens with this bit of mystery for his character, and kind of that journey. So I really like how that is established. And then when
I just wanted to throw something in there because I did like following, Daisy Ridley as Rey, but I also like John Boyega as Finn because, as you said, he's a little bit like the Luke Skywalker character in that you're following him because everything is new to him, and it's interesting because Daisy Ridley is the true Luke Skywalker character, but yet we're not they've kind of split the character into two,
right.
And so I wonder if that doesn't then affect the narrative and affect the movie as a whole, because now you're getting like two for the price of one almost, but like in A New Hope, that role is served by Luke Skywalker only, whereas in this movie, you're then kind of splitting the focus. And I kind of had a hard time keeping up with like who was truly the protagonist, and I got the sense, obviously, by the way the movie was going, that it was going to be Daisy Ridley, which was totally fine. But, there was this kind of weird, like, well, I'm supposed to still be, paying attention to John Boyega, but then there's also Poe. Like, it didn't have the clear delineation that A New Hope did with the three characters.
I agree. And do you feel that it was, like, as you brought up before, that you didn't feel like, after the second viewing, you didn't feel like this film had many ideas? Did you feel like you just got so much being derivative of the first trilogy that there's just... Like you're saying, it even splits off to the characters. I mean, we're like, because for me, like even with Daisy Ridley's character, it took me a little while to really kind of really embrace her character. And I'm saying it took me till like even the end of this film. And the thing is, what actually hurts me getting on board her character is when the screenplay says through other characters, "Oh, you really know your way around the Millennium Falcon. You're really good at this." Because that's stuff that just, for me, it's nails on the blackboard. Like, I just feel the screenwriter saying, "Oh, she gets all the credit. She's as good as the original, Skywalker," because we're just saying that. But then I'm like, the fact that they had to come out and say that just takes things, it moves things a few steps back for me. And I don't know why. Maybe that could be one of the reasons why it took me a little while. And I did end up really embracing her as one of the main characters here through this journey. But I just felt like they had big shoes to fill, and they knew that, and that came off the script through the screen to me. And I go, okay, well, this is just not, like, they never had to do this with the original trilogy. They just showed it. So it just seemed like a lot kind of being forced down your throat, at least from my perspective. But the opposite with Oscar Isaac's character, I felt that he, that really worked well. He wasn't just being completely derivative of Han Solo. There was a little bit more, something more unique about his character that I did like. So it took me a little while. I think, like I said, John Boyega's character is the character I related to the most, once we learned more about him, obviously. But the thing is, and then Oscar Isaac, and then it took me, a little while to warm up to Rey.
So I think Rey, I liked Rey, but I think, her character is more like, she has all these abilities and she's just being held back by being stuck on Jakku with
Right.
I believe she has like this debt, like she's just stuck. So I like the idea. It's like, oh, well, what if we actually take this incredibly talented individual and get her away from that? And that's how she starts to prove herself. It's like, I know all this. I can do this. I just never had a chance to do it. So I think that's cool. But you have other characters that you then also need to give screen time to. And they have different vantage points and different platforms. And when you mix them all together, it starts to kind of... they don't gel necessarily together, because you have the highly talented Rey who can pilot the Millennium Falcon and who can do this and you can do that. And then you have Finn who is learning stuff and is capable, but he's still trying to figure stuff out. And then you throw in Oscar Isaac as Poe, who is also equally talented, but not nearly as talented as Rey. So you have this mix where you're kind of like, everyone's jockeying for your attention to tell their story, and then you kind of end up losing out on stuff like, I wanted to know more about Finn, or I really wanted to know more about Poe, but oh yeah, like, tell me more about Rey and like what's going on with her. Whereas in A New Hope, because each of those characters are such archetypes, where it's like archetypes to where you kind of like, okay, this is the princess, this is the rogue, this is the hero. Everyone's staying in their lane and they're doing their jobs. Here, I feel like they try to flip the script a little bit to the detriment of the actual story and the actual characterization.
I go into this movie, even with low expectations, going, okay, I do want this movie to work its magic on me. I want to embrace this. I want to love this movie. And at the end of the movie, I go, I liked a lot of it. But then I'm going, why doesn't this part work here? And you kind of touched up on a bit of that. And the thing is, and this might be unfair of me to say, but as much as I said I've eventually warmed up to Daisy Ridley and her performance in this role, I just go, well, if Cate Blanchett in her mid-20s played this role of hitting the same beats, using the same script as, for this role of Rey, she probably would have had that line taken out of like, oh, you're really good at this, because she would have just shown it with her performance, and it would just be a lot more natural for some reason, and I would have bought that a lot, more easily. So, and that's why, like, I bought John Boyega's character, and then I bought Oscar Isaac's, and I just felt like that one just didn't fit as much with me, and I just felt that, if it was Cate Blanchett, I've seen her in so many movies at the time when she was just starting out, where just so effortlessly you buy her in any role she's in. And that's where I felt like if she was in this, boom, she would hit it out of the park. Where I just think it took Daisy Ridley some time to do that, and it just seemed a little bit more forced from my perspective, and the reason why this was a tougher pill to swallow. But and even that kind of, and we're not going to go into it, but like even I see, as much as I like her in another film, the next film, you kind of see some moments where it's just like she's looking at a blank slate or something like that. I'm like, wait, are you the character? It just seems like you're just saying these lines, and I'm not totally buying it. It's these notes that don't really work as well with me. But yeah, so it just seems like it doesn't, as much as J.J. Abrams, really doing his best to make sure that you're kind of getting something, this energy that he wants within all these characters. Like you said, they're all kind of staying in their own lane. It's not working 100% with me. Though I do see, and I give him a lot of credit for the effort and what all the actors are also bringing on board. It's a tough thing to achieve from my, it's something that I was looking for them to achieve. I think they did a very good job. It just quite didn't. It left me kind of going, oh, I guess I kind of expected those pieces to fit a lot better than they did with me.
I was just gonna say, it's such a difficult movie to put together because I kind of feel like you're almost held hostage a little bit by everyone's expectation.
Yeah. So how can you fulfill these?
Yeah, it's
I'm the one kind of going, hey, you got to strike gold again.
Yeah, and it might be a little too demanding.
That's subconsciously what now I expect because that bar was raised so high. And we've already gotten that bar already kind of like, with the prequels, it's lowered a bit. But it's like, well, now we've gotten this huge treat with the original trilogy, and we're expecting something along the same heights as that? Is it ridiculous on us as fans to be expecting? Do we need to be in check? That could be it. And to the point where this film is so in line with the original trilogy that they can't steer further away from it. Would that be just so jarring that we wouldn't be able to handle that? Most movies, a lot of movies, they have sequels that are very Hangover trilogy, right? They're very similar to the Hangover 2 is just almost like a carbon copy of the first one, just in a different location. Well, that's because audiences want more of that. They don't want you to go, well, no, we're not going to be hungover. We're going to do this. So it's us. It could be. It's me. The fault's on me. But nonetheless, even though it didn't really totally work as much as I kind of wanted it to, a lot was working within that first half. So you can see them doing the heavy lifting, and I did enjoy the first half of this movie. But what did you think of BB-8?
Oh, I love BB-8. It's an even cuter R2-D2. It has Disney's handiwork written all over it. It emotes as you'd expect it should. Mm-hmm. It provides all of that kind of, that humor, which, it's a guilty pleasure for me. I think these movies need that. I think, certain people might say, well, Star Wars needs to be more dark or blah, blah, blah. But, there's a charm to those types of characters, so I did enjoy BB-8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I enjoyed them too. Again, I know they had to get a new toy coming in here, and I'm like, all right.
Yeah, and that's exactly what that is.
I mean, I didn't like as much as, again, R2-D2 and C-3PO and that stuff, so it doesn't really resonate as much as those. It's hard to do. I get that. But what about also the reveal of the Millennium Falcon? I did like how that was revealed. How that just shows up. Did you feel that coming, though, when they're like, did you feel that surprise on the way?
I think you knew to expect familiar faces and familiar ships and characters and whatnot.
But how it was revealed, did you expect
Well, you know what? All of that stuff was done really well. There was a certain amount of reverence that they did with all of that stuff. You had mentioned in the trailer when Han Solo was like, Chewie, we're home. All of those things went at the very end when you get that first glimpse of Luke Skywalker. All those things were done really well, very respectfully. So, I'm a sucker for that stuff. If I'm having issues with the movie, when I do see things like that, I may still really buy into it. I may get chills, all that stuff. It still had an effect. They were not so crass enough that I was completely disconnected from all of those callbacks.
Yeah. I think all those callbacks, they work for me. Then it's once we had those characters kind of established, now they're meeting each other, and now you're throwing in all these nice little treats along the way, the nostalgia trip. That was working for me. And then once you, and again, I think that Adam Driver's, the great thing is they established the villain, and you're still trying to find out, well, how bad are they gonna, how evil is this villain? Mm-hmm. And you're still trying to get a gauge on that as the film progresses. Because again, at first you kind of go, okay, this seems like this is the new Darth Vader, and it's not going to be nearly as impactful or as effective as the original Darth Vader. But let's see where they're taking this. And I think that character, I think as the film progresses and you're introduced to Han Solo, there is that. I love his entrance. Of course, you had Leia's entrance. I believe that's later on. Does Leia show up before Han Solo or after? I think it was before, right?
I don't remember, and that sounds terrible. I thought it was after.
I remember she's more prevalent afterwards, but I'm just trying to imagine when her first appearance is. I can't quite remember that. I think that there's that scene after you're introduced to Han Solo with Finn and Rey. There's that chase, going on. That's the thing that didn't work as well with me. I don't know if it's the CGI, whatever it is. It's kind of funny because you know that Han's still up to his kind of tricks to some degree.
Yeah.
So
That was a little
good.
tough.
It was a tougher pill to swallow. I was just like, all right, I'm not totally on board this. But that was there. It still doesn't. And then when I've rewatched it since, it's always a scene that I go, okay, let's move on. Let's just get to the story here. I think that just takes away because you only have 2 hours in this film, and now we're spending this time on this scene here. I'm not sure if it totally works as well as they wanted it to.
But you know what? And that actually leads me to some of the other things which I want to mention. The movie does capture my imagination, which I really like. So I see a lot of these scenes, which, they don't necessarily serve the movie very well, and they could probably have been cut. But you get to see stuff. You get to see, I've said it before, and it'll be something that I continue to say throughout these episodes related to Star Wars and beyond. I like to see aliens. I like to see robots. What do you got? Show me. Show me your most creative stuff. And this movie did a good job of that.
You've mentioned this on a previous episode, I think when we talked about Tenet, blow my mind, have my mind blown here. And I would say, I think for me, I would love to see something like that really kind of blows my mind. Like we talked about Edge of Tomorrow. The aliens there, I didn't expect anything from the aliens, but they came up with something that didn't blow my mind, but it was just whoa, that was, even though it's CGI, that was disturbing. They struck a chord with me. And I always leave that door open.
They don't even need to be super mind-blowing. They just need to capture attention and, bonus points if when you leave the theater you kind of think about that. You think about that alien or you think about that scene.
Yeah, but I don't think about any of that from these characters here. As a matter of fact, I actually thought more from the original prequels when it came to all those alien stuff. And a lot of them were bad, but then some of them really did. Some of them did hit. But that's the thing. I didn't have any of that impact from this movie, from those monsters, whatever, that were going after Han. None of that really resonated. Even as I was watching it seemed so ephemeral that I'm like, I'm going to forget about this 45 seconds after it's over. Felt like that then, still feel like that. Always fast forward through it when, I don't really find that as enjoyable as I think they thought it should be.
Right. I think that's more for the Star Wars fans who are kind of now we're seeing new aliens and what's up with them. And so I totally get that. It's window dressing for a regular, movie viewer. And then I think it needs a little bit more for fans or lapsed fans of Star Wars.
Right. And at that point, we got to we had that introduction of Han Solo. Then we see him in this little action scene. And then once that's over with, Han's kind of discussing bringing Finn and Rey up to speed in terms of what's going on about the Force. He determines that,
a lot of exposition, and then they meet Maz Kanata, who then Maz Kanata, who then walks them through a little bit more of that, and Rey finds Anakin's lightsaber, and that kind of links this movie to the original trilogy, and now we're kind of starting to go through all the traps to tie these movies together even more so. When
I watch Han being the one to give that exposition where he's like, I was in Hollywood Homicide, and then I did K-19, and then we met for the Force. I just felt like he might as well have been going down that path of his own biography. But I didn't feel it's something that character would have necessarily done. I don't know why, but if anything, I go, okay, maybe he's aged so much where he's not as immature as he used to be. But I was just like, okay, we're having him be the character to provide us with this exposition. But all right, I kind of wanted to see more from him.
May I interrupt and say that's why I don't want to see characters again after their arc. Because
that's a good point.
They are going to have to do things that you don't want them
you don't want them to be like, let's bring out the blackboard and let's go through this.
Right, exactly.
I've got a paycheck. And that's where I go, if you're going to bring him out, don't have him do this. I'd rather see him on Jimmy Kimmel. So, that's where I go, okay, fine. And then it's all exposition, getting the, now you got to set up these main protagonists to have them have the platform to really thrive. And that's when you go, okay, this is it. We're going to be phasing out the old characters, and we haven't even gotten to Luke yet. Where the hell is he going to come into the mix? I'm not getting what I'm looking for, but all right, let's see where this goes. And then you're kind of off now. You've established all these. You spent enough time with these new characters. They're all going to kind of meet and confront each other. So I'm trying to think of the other plot points leading up to the finale. I think I'm going to be racing through this.
I think what we can say is, there's all these very convenient kind of things that they need to do in order to move the story and the conflict forward, which culminates in kind of this mission where all three of them are together, including Han Solo and Chewbacca. Spoiler alert, Han Solo is killed. Throughout rather early in the movie, we find out that Kylo Ren's father and mother is Han Solo and Leia, which is interesting, but I was a little disappointed in that.
Coincidental.
Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, we're still stuck with this family thing, even though we could tell a completely different story. But okay,
right.
I knew Han Solo was going to die because I knew Han Solo wanted. Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to die as early as Return of the Jedi.
Right.
So that didn't necessarily shock me. We get a really cool sequence where...
Wait, that didn't shock you when he fell down there? Did you, knowing that, did you go, there you go, huh? There you go, Harrison, you're out of here. This is good. You got what you wanted.
It was maybe 30 years in the making. You got your wish, here you go.
Right. We didn't even mention one of the other characters, Snoke. We totally forgot about him. Is it because he's forgettable? Is it because he's so derivative of the Emperor?
Yeah, he absolutely is. And again, that idea, are you so bereft of concepts that you need this? However, I was fine with that. I'm like, okay, well, yeah. How are you going to top the Emperor? Well, you at least need
Thanos.
You need some kind of weird, twisted overseer. So I forgave them for that. But we're going to talk a lot about Snoke in our next episode.
Right. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it moves into this whole, now after Han Solo dies, then you moved up to the final battle where now Rey has to step up to the plate. Finn's going to be fighting there with her. So it's
great
now
atmosphere, by the way.
I did like that
battle
atmosphere.
In the snow. I really like that.
Adam Driver punching his chest after he got. So I did like that, and then there was the whole thing that every fan was waiting for. When Rey was trying to use the Force to grab the lightsaber, you thought Luke was going to come in and save her at that point. That disappointed a lot of fans. I wasn't even thinking that at that point.
Actually,
I wasn't expecting it either. I was just like, all right, I knew it was going to happen. She's got to earn that reason to be the protagonist, and this fight's going to lead also to that.
I was confused because then Finn also takes up the lightsaber. Right. And again, these are not movies where you necessarily have kind of, you don't need to necessarily be that kind of deep, confusing or up in the air. These are movies that really should stick to a particular path. So I thought it was weird that they
That's where I disagree. I think go off path. That's my thing. I'm so familiar. We're leading to this road that's so familiar for me that I'm like, all right, yeah, this is very familiar. This is a fan show. J.J. Abrams is putting on the Star Wars fan show.
It should kind of stay with that because if you go off path a bit, you really need to do everything you can to back that up because it's so easy to then let people down. Because when you go off path and you kind of start to play with people's expectations, foreshadowing.
I knew already you're hinting towards this overused thing since 2017. That's disgusting. And we're going to get into that later. It's disgusting that you say it so early, too.
If I didn't bring it up, you were going to in the next episode.
Oh, we're going to get into it.
I don't mind that at all in any other movie, but these are Star Wars movies, and they basically live or die on tropes. And the idea, you and I don't necessarily want that, and I get that because we've seen many other movies and we want more from that. But that's not what you go to Star Wars to see. You kind of go to see this adventure, and you kind of want them to stick to that hero's journey story, which has been told for many, many hundreds of years.
I disagree, and I'll tell you why. So let's give a hypothetical, okay? We brought this up briefly in the prequel episodes, I believe. But if it was 83 is when Return of the Jedi came out. But if Disney bought Fox in 83, and then they're like, you're going to pull out more trilogies. So then we'd have 86, 89, 92, a new trilogy, and they did what you just described. You're getting to you're coming with new characters, getting to familiar territory. Okay, then they're like, let's do a new trilogy. 95, 98, the 2001. A new trilogy, same familiar territory. It's Star Wars. We don't want to go off path. And then you go 2004, 2007, like, I'm sick of this one flavor. Like, I am so sick of it. And they're gonna keep doing this. I say this because, well, that could potentially happen. They were on that path to some
That's
degree.
fair to say, but that's not what happened.
But that's pretty much what you're kind of saying, though, like, right? Like,
Yeah, but-
you know,
but that's
that's
not-
fan service. That is fan service, right? Like, that's what we're calling it.
But we're living in a world where we don't have, what you've basically described as 15 Star Wars movies.
But that could be, and especially the way
But
we're
again,
going.
but
They
no,
were headed
there
that
could-
way.
You're right. There could be, but there wasn't. And especially if you're going to kind of bring in the new characters, like I think there was like a particular pace that they could have followed. But I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, because we will talk about the next. We could talk a lot about this in the next episode where it comes to the 4.
Well, one thing we brought up way too many times in this episode, but I'll bring it up briefly, as we know, with studio executives, and especially when it comes to merchandise, the Batman return syndrome, which is that you veered off path, and now these toys, parents are going to buy these toys for them.
Right.
Stay on path. And that is the thing that I think, like you said, well, if it did happen, well, yes, that would happen, because that's the consistent mindset within these studios, and especially if it were Disney. So I'm actually, now I'm not bringing up The Mandalorian. I haven't all caught up there as well. I know they take a different path, but it's because they introduce these new characters where it's like, well, you don't have that much investment. It's not Han, Luke, and Leia. You can kind of mess with this. Rogue One, they had done that too. What I liked about Rogue One, as much as I don't enjoy the film overall, like, I do like the beat that it ends on. I thought that was interesting that you're taking that path. So that's, but they could take those risks because that came from the script. Most of those characters came from thin air, and there wasn't.
Well, yeah, and that's also
it's a small
why
story.
Right. I didn't want them to bring back the new characters, because then you have this weird kind of double duty where it's like, are we going to tell a completely different story that twists and turns, which would have been cool, but we're bringing in the new characters? Like, what do they want to do? Like, I feel like let's get really crazy with it, but like, let's not have all these old characters and all these old ideas. And I guess that's my issue. I'm not saying that Star Wars needs to follow a specific path. Let me clarify. But when you start to have these callbacks and stuff, then it creates this dissonance as a moviegoer. It's like, well, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to evoke nostalgia, or are you trying to take me in a new direction? And I personally, maybe I'm being very strict, but like, perhaps you can't have it both ways.
I think that is tough to juggle. You're right. How do you do that? And like, that's the challenge that they're. I mean, that's the challenge with sequels. That's the challenge with trilogies. You make that work. I mean, did they do the callbacks in the original trilogy with Empire, Return of the Jedi that much?
Well, they were still telling a brand new story.
Right.
And actually,
so isn't that the best mindset to take it within these new trilogies?
Which is what I wanted them to do, but they didn't.
But with the same characters, you're just telling you're just taking it.
Yeah, it's so hard because there's so much history and so much expectation that once you say we're bringing Han Solo and Luke and Leia back, immediately you're kind of like, well, I'm binding myself.
But they did a good job with an Empire, like you called it the best of them all.
Oh yeah, but come on, like there's a difference between a sequel 3 years later and then a new sequel after 6 movies and 30 years of history.
You're not. If the movie just came out 3 years ago, you're not already like salivating for callbacks.
Right. Imagine.
Oh my god.
Exactly.
Right? Like the Matrix trilogy didn't even do that. But yeah, I think so. Like that's the key thing, to make sure that you're constantly on the ball with something new, something challenging. And when you're polluting your mind with intentions of doing callbacks, and I hate using the term fan service, but that's what it is. Right. That's where you go off path a little bit. Long term, in terms of how that film will resonate, that could have an impact.
Yeah, it's like short term pain, long term gain.
Right. So when I always look back on Force Awakens, I always reflect on how I love the strong beginning. I love the patience with it in many moments. Like, we saw this in 3D from what I recall. So when the lightsaber went up when Kylo Ren initially uses the Force to grab the lightsaber, that really worked well there. And that's something that resonates well with me. And Adam Driver's performance is very good there too. And the thing is, I think that once the movie was over with, like what I really enjoyed is kind of how Adam Driver played the character, because you thought, where could this be taken? It's like Adam Driver is playing it more like emotional, a little erratic, where it's just like this could be that angsty teenager who wants to even like outdo that, you know, the person the person he emulated, which was Darth Vader. So it's just like, wow, he can really go much further. He can do a whole lot more damage, and that's where you go. I'm really curious to see where the next films go. So there was more there was more anticipation for the next episode in this trilogy that I was excited for. Whereas when I went into Force Awakens, I had my expectations low. Now they've been raised a little bit. So that's kind of what had kind of resonated with me after I initially saw the film, which is still tough because I go, wow, this film, you know, we saw it, and then I had to see it again, and I realized that after I saw it within a few days of watching it the first time, that so much of it was so ephemeral that I started even forgetting some scenes. Like I said, that scene with Han Solo on the, you know, right after we meet him, that fight, that just like, I immediately forgot it almost 2 hours after I watched it the first time. And I'm like, oh, watching a second time, like, oh, right, we have this scene to get to. And then a few other things. So, you know, there were the moments that really worked, really did, but the other moments, a lot of it kind of fell short. And still to this day, like when I rewatch, I'm like, oh, right, I forgot there's this scene in there. So there are those issues I have with it, but I still think a very good film. You know, it is a tough task for J.J. Abrams to achieve, and you know, I think he succeeded.
And look, the movie stands very well on its own. I think if you start to look at it as part of one movie and a trilogy, tri-trilogy of 9, then yes, absolutely. There's
they built a solid foundation within this one, I think. So I did like the first hour.
If you were just going into it, if you weren't a big Star Wars fan, if you just wanted to see kind of like a sci-fi fantasy action movie, then yeah, like this movie's not terrible. Like it's not radioactive, it's not awful by any means. I think it's when you start to look for various nuances based on it being a Star Wars movie, it following the prequels, it having to kind of, pay respect to the original trilogy, that's when it gets complicated. But, I definitely think, I've said my say on this for sure, because we've got a lot of episodes to cover still.
Right. So, but yeah, and just in conclusion, I'd say this one was satisfying enough, but it also birthed a new hope. So let's get to the next episode. There'll be 2 more days left to Christmas when we talk about it. So we'll see you guys. We'll be bouncing you to that episode now.
See you later. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to not miss a single bounce.
We'll catch you next time, and don't forget to leave reviews on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you listen to Movie Bounce.